Welcome back to this week's theater episode of the Campfire Series podcast. I am your host, Logan Soforenko. Exciting announcements coming up, but stay tuned with us as we are approaching 1 year on Campfire Series. It's pretty awesome. Today we have a very special guest from the Dear Evan Hansen Broadway company, Mr. Josh Strobl, who is the Universal Understudy. Let's get to it.
So my name is Josh Strobl. I was in the show Dear Evan Hansen on Broadway until the recent shutdown in March. I guess now a year, it's not so recent, but I went to school at the University of Michigan for musical theater, and I went to John Burroughs High School, which is how we know each other. And I guess a fun fact about me, so I actually lived in Japan for 2 years as a kid, and when I tell people that, they don't really believe me, but I have like pictures. Some of my first words were Japanese words. So yeah, that's a fun fact.
I have to ask, is it because you said your dad worked at Universal? Was it because they were opening up the park in Japan?
That is exactly it. Yep.
No way. That's why
Yes.
you lived there? That's insane.
I know. Yeah. When I tell people that, they're like, why would you have lived there? And my dad literally was building a theme park there.
That's crazy.
So yeah.
That is
Yeah,
absolutely insane.
He's been working at Universal now for like 35 years, I think. Like basically his whole life. Yeah.
Well, let's go kind of in chronological order. You got some pretty good recognition doing a certain musical theater competition in high school. You first went to the Jerry Herman Awards at the Hollywood Pantages Theater, and you won that doing a Hairspray song, and you sounded really good doing it.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about. I love hearing the journey about Jerry Herman's, especially since we participated in it. But tell me a little bit about the Jimmies in a nutshell.
Yeah. So if it's all right with you, I'll like start a little bit at the Jerry Hermans, because the Jerry Hermans were an interesting awards because it's in LA, and so like obviously LA is around all the studios and stuff. So the judges were incredible judges. Like, I mean, not to say that Jimmy Ward's judges weren't, but like incredible judges, which I still keep in contact with today. One of them being Kenny Ortega, who's famous for all the High School Musical movies and choreographing Michael Jackson and like crazy things. But Jerry Herman's was the regional program that got me to the Jimmy Awards. And the Jimmy Awards is a high school musical theater awards set in New York, in which you have to win either Best Actor or Best Actress in your regional program from whatever state you're in the U.S. And all of these winners from each program come to the Jimmy Awards to compete in the Jimmy Awards. And the Jimmy Awards is about like, when I was there, around 80 or so people from all across the U.S., all already winners. So these people, I mean, just insanely talented. I remember calling my mom the first day I got there because we all got to hear each other sing. And I was like, you can still come, like definitely still come to the event, but like don't be expecting anything because I don't know if I'm getting solos in this. I don't know what's happening. But it was just so cool, and those people I still stay in contact with today. Some of them I was literally working with 2 years later in Dear Evan Hansen. So it was a really incredible event. Lasted about 10 days in New York and ended up winning best actor in that. So
there you go.
Yeah,
I think that so. When I did the Jerry Herman Awards and I was starting to do the opening medley, I looked up the Jimmy Award medleys just for fun, and I looked up the Pantages ones, and I saw your solos, and I saw you sing Maria, and I was just completely blown away. And it's just insane, and it's clear there's a reason why you're in one of the most vocally demanding shows on Broadway.
Thank you, dude. Thank you.
So
yeah, definitely not the dance demanding, which is great. Great for me.
Well, so tell me a little bit about, this is an interesting fact. When Andrew Barth Feldman was in the show and you were in the show at the same time, those are two Jimmy winners right there. Did the Jimmy Awards play a factor at all into you getting cast in Evan Hansen, or was it more about your studying time when you were at the University of Michigan?
I think truly everything comes down to the Jimmy Awards, whether I know it or not. I think it definitely played a hand because, I mean, some of the people that I worked with at the Jimmy Awards were major casting directors and agents and all these people that are getting to see me perform a solo, which I wouldn't have been able to have the chance to do in real life, you know. And then having this recognition is also amazing to have that on my resume. So I think it all comes down to the Jimmy Awards. I definitely learned a ton at my 2 years at Michigan, which helped me. And this is also an important fact too. I didn't get the Dear Evan Hansen my first try. I
Mm.
actually went in for it 8 times.
Wow.
Um, yeah, over the course of about a year and a half, and ended up getting it the very last time. And it was a time that I was like, oh, no way in hell I'm doing this. Like, I bombed my audition and ended up getting it. Like, it was just one of those things. So I think it all stems from the Jimmies, but definitely a lot of work, definitely taking their notes, definitely like being malleable, you know. But Andrew, there was a funny thing there. So I was at school and I had just booked Dear Evan Hansen, and I wasn't supposed to tell anybody or anything like that, but I told like my best friend, and that's about it. And then an article comes out saying Jimmy Award winner to star as title role in Dear Evan Hansen, and I was like, wow, this is a huge article, and I'm just the understudy. Like, this is great. And then I look up and it says Andrew Barth Feldman, and I'm like, oh, abort! Don't announce yet. Don't announce that I'm in
Right.
this. But yeah, it's a very funny moment, and Andrew is the best person. Like, just a joy to work with, truly.
How long did you have to keep it in? I never. I'm shame on me for not asking performers this more. But how long did you actually have to keep the secret in? Because especially you're around a bunch of theater people when you were at Michigan, and I don't know if that's when you got cast, but how long did you hold it in?
So it felt like forever. It felt like forever, but
Mm-hmm.
really it was only about like 2 or so weeks.
Okay.
Like not that long. But I had been like telling people like I'm flying out to New York to audition. Like this is my final audition, you know, and like obviously being from Michigan, the writers of the show are also graduates of Michigan. So it was
Oh.
just like, yeah, Pascal and Paul, who they wrote Dear Evan Hansen, they wrote La La Land, Greatest Showman. I mean, they're huge, but it was definitely very tough to keep it in. Like I wanted to tell everybody and their mother, but I couldn't. um, but yeah, it's a tough to keep that a secret for sure.
Well, good for you for having the willpower to do it.
Thank
And
you.
now, when you got cast and you started off as a very unique position to be in a show, you were
Mhm.
the universal understudy. Am I correct? That's what it started off
Yes,
as. So
yes.
why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about that title? Because you always hear theater people, you hear stand by, you just hear standby, you hear swing, you hear understudy. You don't really hear specific breakdowns. So tell me a little bit
Mhm.
about what exactly that entails.
Yeah. So the Universal track is like a somewhat new track. I believe it started with I want to say like Hamilton started it, to be honest with you. Very new, and it was because there's shows, or maybe like Wicked started it, but there are shows now that are so popular that have so many companies around the world, really. I mean, you look at a show like Wicked, and they have like 8 companies open right now all across the world, and Lion King has played in every single continent. Like it's crazy. So a universal cover, our job is to know one, two, in my case, 3 roles in every single company that is open. So, yeah, so it's tough. It's almost like knowing, because I knew for 4 different companies: the Broadway company, the touring company, Canada, and the UK. So technically, I knew 12 tracks,
So you
even
had to have a
though
passport. You had to have a passport in case.
yes, yeah, and I used it. I lived in Toronto for 6 months and did the Canadian production of Dear Evan Hansen because they needed the help out there, and mainly for Evan. But but yeah, I was like the Universal Evan cover in particular because Jared and Connor I also covered, but didn't necessarily need the coverage as much. Evan is obviously, as you know, like a very vocally demanding role, impossible to do 8 shows a week. So they definitely need all the help that they can get, and I was just happy that I could be there, you know. But yeah, Universal track is definitely crazy.
When we
Yeah.
saw when we saw the show, we unfortunately didn't see it in New York. We saw the tour when it came by in the Amundsen, like most people
Uh-huh.
did in LA. But we
I
saw a
saw that too.
matinee. We saw Stephen
Mm.
Anthony do it. So we
Yes.
we we you just said how hard it is to do this show 8 times a week, or specifically for Evan, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting. Just you hear the songs and they just sound insane, and there's also some quiet ones, but then there's also the range and the belting. And
Yeah.
this is gonna sound very, very weird, but when I watch you sing, your vibrato is so strong. I need to hear what, not hear like sing, but like I need to hear what exactly it means when I see your Adam's apple literally vibrate back and forth. How do you do that with your voice? Like, I'm so intrigued.
You know, I used to get, so I've always kind of had this vibrato, and I didn't know if I was doing something wrong with it. It wasn't until school where I really like kind of honed in on it and like knew what I was doing. But vibrato, fun fact, that's actually the voice's most natural way of singing. It's the most like freeing, and when you do straight tone, you're actually constricting your vocal folds, and so they're like kind of getting like just pressed together. Whereas like vibrato, they're like floating like that, and it's hard to explain without getting like too scientific. But yeah, that's just like kind of what I do. But I definitely had to rein it back for Dear Evan Hansen because it's a very pop-ish musical. The writers, Pascal and Paul, write very contemporary musical theater songs, and that usually calls for less vibrato. So that was something in rehearsals that I like really had to get used to, is they were like cut out all the vibrato there, because vibrato can kind of mean like relaxed, and Evan is anything but relaxed. so so whenever I did the vibrato, it was very like mindful. Like I did that in a moment when I was with Zoe or something like that, where I like felt at most ease. But if I was like with my mom in a scene, then it would very much be like straight tone. But I mean, I just love vibrato. I love like old timey musicals, like what you said, Maria. I love West Side Story. So I'm a fan of the vibrato.
Well, props to you for doing the demanding stuff and making the adjustments to doing tracks and rehearsal techniques and show techniques that you weren't necessarily used to. And like you
Exactly.
said about
Yeah.
Pascal and Paul, but now I want to hear something interesting. Doing it
Mhm.
in so many different companies. What was your role? Obviously Evan Hansen, but your role specifically with the Toronto cast, because you were with it until it closed. So tell us a little bit
Yes.
about your time doing it north of the border of America.
Yeah, yes. So that was an interesting time. I mean, I had just left school in November to join the Broadway company, and I was with the Broadway company, learned all 3 tracks in about a month or so, and then our producer calls me in for a one-on-one meeting, and I immediately was like, "Oh shit! Like I'm fired! Like I I obviously suck at these 3 roles." And she brought me in and she said, "You're doing an amazing job." And I was like, "Thank God." And she was like, "But since you are the Universal cover, we wanted to let you know what was going on." And she was like, "We're having a hard time finding coverage for the Canadian production that we're about to open. Would you be willing to go out there?" And I was like, at this point, I was like, "Yes, like whatever you guys say, I will do." And I went out there and lived in a different country when I was 20 years old, and like did not know a single person in this company, um, and had the time of my life. Like it was like truly the best people, the best food in Toronto. Like Toronto had just great food, um, and just amazing company. So they opened in March, and unfortunately, due to unknown circumstances, they wouldn't really like get too much into detail with us. They had to close the company. and I believe it was like they were just having a hard time finding people to do the role out there, like stockpiling Evans, and so yeah, the show closed early, and I was with it the entire time. When it was supposed to be, I was out there for like, I think I was supposed to be out there for 3 weeks, and then ended up being out there for about 5 months. But I mean, summer in Canada is just gorgeous, gorgeous time. I didn't get the cold weather, thankfully. So it was just like the time of my life. I went on a lot as Evan too, out there. So yeah, and I covered all 3 tracks out there.
I mean, you said you didn't know a single person in the company. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, this is the guy coming from the States up to Canada. You know what I mean?
Which helped a little bit. Yeah, I remember getting there and like immediately being thrown in. Like I had just learned these tracks on Broadway, and then this show, like there were some line changes because um, they don't have Trader Joe's in Canada. So like
What?
there was a
Oh,
few
I feel
lines in Dear
so
Evan
bad for
Hansen.
Canadians, man.
I know. And so there's a few lines that say Trader Joe's in it. Had to like relearn some of the lines for that, and just some other lines that didn't quite like hit with Canadian audiences as well as it did with US audiences. Um, so just had to like learn some changes, learn some like it was a bigger stage, so I had to like learn new numbers and stuff, and it was tough on the brain, but like the most fun I've ever had. Like so much fun.
You said bigger stage. Yeah, the Music Box in Broadway is one of the smaller houses on Broadway, and it's so,
Definitely.
in fact, so small. I mean, the show Evan Hansen's orchestra is above in the
Yep.
wings. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, they get creative with their space for sure.
but with that, you had some
Mhm.
pretty interesting stories when it comes to covering multiple tracks in one day. So, tell
Yes.
us a little bit about that.
So that's a pretty crazy story. I had been back now for about five-ish months in New York, and right when I got back, I went into auditions for this new project, and was in auditions for a while and ended up booking that. And it was like a workshop of a new musical, and that workshop happened to fall in the same week as that crazy thing that happened in Dear Evan Hansen. So I was doing a workshop in the morning and then got a call saying, hey, I know you're supposed to go on for Jared for both shows today, but our Evan called out for the matinee. Is there any way you could do Evan matinee and Jared at night? And I was at this point like tired as hell at this, like learning this completely new show on the side in the morning, and I remember just rushing over there, warming up, and like giving it my all for the Evan show, and then the Jared show, whatever I had left. But it was a crazy crazy time, and I don't believe anyone else has ever done that in the show, because it's actually a rule. Once you do an Evan show in one day, you're not allowed to do another show. So if it's a 2 show day and you do an Evan show in the matinee, you cannot go on for the night show. But we were just so short on coverage that night that it was like either you have to do this or we were canceling the show. So it was very much like I didn't really have a choice. And it was the coolest experience ever. Like it was just such a thrill. I got to have some people in the audience to watch it, so it was a great time. Crazy crazy time.
It sounds
Yes.
like I didn't even think about that. I just think that, especially you're doing, like you said, doing one of the hardest roles in the afternoon, and then you're doing a big. And Evan Hansen, every role has a good amount of parts and a good amount of stage time, if you ask me, and
Hmm.
especially Jared. Like, you went on as Jared or Connor that night.
Jared that night.
So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's just insane. I don't know how you did that and pulled
It's
out the
really
steam
wild
for it.
because I mean the show. I don't know if I said this, but Dear Evan Hansen's already. It's a very small show. It's
Hmm.
an 8-person cast. So like when anybody calls out, we have an entire understudy cast that could happen. Like the most I think we've had is 5 or 6 people, 5 or 6 understudies on at one time. But that's almost like a complete understudy cast. And so yeah, we're very very short on coverage, and that's why we have like 2 or 3 covers for Evan, and 2 or 3 covers for Jared. But definitely a lot of material. Like Evan doesn't really leave the stage, and Jared's very wordy. Like he's like, I mean, he just speaks very fast, and at a very like uses big words and stuff. And so like if you get tripped over, then you're screwed for that scene. So luckily I did not, which is good. But yeah, crazy time.
How do you track your tracks? But how do you figure like learn each part? I when I was watching my nerdy theater part of me watching Broadway.com backstage, tours and vlogs, I see that they go to some swings and some understudies who are covering multiple parts, and they have their iPad out and they have this program that like dots, and they put it on each part of the stage. And I don't know what it is, but that's their method. What's your method for learning each track?
I write everything down. Like I have a script for Evan and a script for Jared and Connor. And my Evan script, I don't know if I have it on me, but I mean, it's just like the most specific thing you've ever seen. Like I thought we were getting specific in Hairspray my senior year at Burroughs. But
Great show, by the way.
Thank you. It was definitely a great show, but nowhere near as specific as we got in Evan Hansen, because I mean, you have like down to the inch of like where you are supposed to be for like lighting and stuff. Everything is very programmed for you, to the point where like if I'm in the wrong place, I could literally get run over by like an oncoming disc that's coming in, that's carrying furniture, and like, or like a panel that's flying in above, because we have the show's very like techie, Dear Evan Hansen, and we don't have much of a set, but all of our stuff is just like flying in and like going side to side, so you can get hurt pretty bad if you don't know where you are. So I had to be so specific. One of my favorite notes is our stage manager, when she was like teaching me the show and everything, she said, when you cross to this side of Zoe, secretly change your backpack from one shoulder. And I was like, why? Like, why is that so specific? But it's just a thing that like everything is like so choreographed. So those iPads that you were talking about is like basically like the directions of where you're walking. You've seen Dear Evan Hansen, so like the traffic is kind of weird in like Waving Through a Window or You Will Be Found, and it's oddly like specific. It may just seem like people walking around, but each person like has their own like where they're going and why they're passing this person when they are, so it's all very calculated, all very choreographed, and that's why we need to just write everything down. So that's my method, is just good old pen and paper. I'm not good with like the iPad stuff, and
right.
But our dance captain, definitely he did that because he had to know everybody's tracks. So
the first thing that comes to mind when you say everything's so specific, it's the end of Waving Through a Window, when it's the part where you're like, did I ever make a sound? And the whole cast starts coming in, and the lights go to different people, and you're walking around, and they're crossing, and I'm just like, that's so much traffic. How do they do that?
Yep. And then we all somehow get in our spots where the lights are hitting us.
Exactly.
And then turn, and all the lights go crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those magical moments where you're like, this is just like theater at its finest. Like this is like, I'm truly just so grateful and lucky to be a part of this in any way,
I mean, that's why an 8-person eight-person cast member in the show wins the Tony Award for Best Musical. It's so inspiring.
Exactly.
But also, with that being said, some people aren't aware of the subject matter of the show. They're listening to the songs and like, I really click with that on an emotional
like,
level.
this
but
is
also,
a bop, but
it's a bop, but also what is it about? I go to the show, and I'm telling you, in Act 2, towards the end, you could drop a quarter and everyone would look at you, and you could hear the crying, and you could hear literally everything. So I'm getting watery-eyed just thinking about it right now. So as a performer, being so invested in multiple companies and multiple roles, how do you not let that take over your personal life and not let that get in the way of the way Josh is living and working, but
For
also
sure.
delivering it with as much truth as possible. Because I like to say that
Yeah.
acting is lying while telling the truth, because you're putting on a character to tell the truth. So tell me a little bit
Yes.
about that aspect of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because literally the entire plot of Dear Evan Hansen is based on a lie. Like it's that he's just lying the entire time, you
All he
know?
before you go on, all he has to say is, "Did literally for people who haven't seen Evan Hansen, all you have to say is when you go to the Murphys' household and they ask, "Were you friends with Connor?" You could have just said no, and there's no
Nope.
show, but you say yes,
I
and we have the show.
exactly, and that's the drama of it all. But you're right. That it's a great question because the subject matter is very tough, and that's something that actually Dear Evan Hansen trained us for a little bit because they get such young people to play these roles. I mean, Andrew Barth Feldman was 16 years old when he joined the company. I mean, I was 20 years old and I thought that was young, but 16 years old. Like imagine leaving high school to go do this show and this subject matter that's so mature. Um, but that being said, Dear Evan Hansen really helped us out um, and told us a little bit. But Michigan really helped me too. We had some alumni come back and uh, who were also in equally as demanding shows and equally intense subject matter. And one of the questions was asked, "How do you keep your mental health? Like, how do you step away from the theater each night?" And what I like to do was after each show I played as Evan, I would go back into the dressing room and just have like a few minutes to myself, like no dressers, no anything, just like by myself in the dressing room, and just like look at myself in the mirror and leave everything that just happened at the theater. Like I'm not taking any of this baggage home with me. I just like sobbed on a stage and talked about some very very serious stuff on a stage, but now I'm leaving all of that behind and not get carrying that baggage with me home. And that was something good just to like physically check in with myself and be like, I'm Josh now, and I'm definitely not a method actor in any way. Um, but like you do have to say like I'm back in me, like I am like I'm not this character, I don't have this character's um like issues that he's working with, and the situations that he's going through. um so that was just something I used to do. But you're right, it is tough subject matter. And one thing that the Universal cover, one of my another duties of mine was I was the press Evan. And that meant that I would literally go all over to do press for the show. Most of them being like season announcements. So like the Amundsen, when that show came there, before there was a press event getting people ready for the show. And I would be that person that goes and like sings Waving Through a Window or For Forever or You'll Be Found or something like that. And I often got to speak to a lot of like high schoolers about mental health and like what we're trying to do to break the stigma of talking about mental health, and what like Dear Evan Hansen offers, the websites that you can go to if you are struggling, um, because it is tough on the actor when you're getting messages from people being like, I've had these thoughts. What would you say? Like, I've gotten messages like that, and it is tough. I don't know like really how to respond because I'm not a professional by any means. I just am an actor that knows a lot about this topic now. Oftentimes, depending on the severity of it, I would refer them to our websites and people that you can talk to that are professionals about this, that know much more than me. Um, but if it was something I could like talk to them about too, I'd have a conversation. Or if I was mentally like ready to have a conversation with that person, then I would do that. But yeah, you're right. Definitely like tough subject matter that I had to get through.
That's insane that people
Yeah.
like confide in you so much in the character that they reached out to. That's and I really like I thankfully mental health for me has been relatively okay. But in the pandemic, it's obviously everybody's gone through something. But
Mhm.
for you to be able to say, hey, I don't know, I can't give you
Mhm.
this. Here's people who can, and that's just
Yeah,
a really big theme that people in our country, in our times, and in this subject matter of mental health, and people need to be able to hold that accountability and say, hey, I can't do this. I can give you, I can show
for
you love
sure.
and endless love. I can't say, hey, this is the right way to do it, because you know what I mean.
Yeah, because you really never know. Like I'm not trained on like on like some trigger warnings and stuff. Like I don't know if what I say could trigger something in somebody, or if my wording isn't correct. Like I can seriously mess with somebody, and I don't want to have that responsibility on me. I want the people that study this and know how to talk to people like that. But yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I appreciate you telling me a little bit about that, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff I'm learning right now that I didn't know before, and the responsibilities that you guys. I mean, can you imagine that? Just I don't even just crazy stuff. Now I'm just go rambling, but now we are in a shutdown, and good Lord, we are somewhat seeing light with vaccinations and with I don't know science. I'm
Yes.
no scientist. I'm a broadcast major, but what's the future for Mr. Josh Strobl? Is it going to be? Are you thinking when it comes back? Are you going to be in Evan Hansen full time? Are you had a new project you were hoping would pick up? But what's it going to be?
Yeah.
There's no set in stone answer
The
because it's all relative. You know what I mean? But
yeah, the age old question: what is the future? What is going to happen? But I am right now. I'm very lucky that I've Dear Evan Hansen has been as communicative as they can be right now, with the little updates that they're getting. Um, and they've expressed that we are all welcome back, when Broadway does come back. So that's good to know that I like have a job to go back to. As far as this new project that I'm working on is still happening, as far as I know. But it is a new thing, so it might take a little bit for it to get its legs again, and that's why I'm just grateful that Dear Evan Hansen is there and is not even a fallback job by any means. Like it's like a job on Broadway. Like that is like my dream, you know. So it's amazing that they are there for us. So I guess that's kind of the future right now. I've been auditioning for more like TV and film stuff because that's been uh hasn't I mean it still took a huge hit from the pandemic, but at least it's happening right now.
go get
um
on SVU, Law and Order.
right. They've been saying they're gonna hire all these actors, and I'm like, okay, where's my audition then?
Lynn
I'm
Kressel,
ready.
Lynn
I'm ready
Kressel
to get on.
casting.
Yes. Yeah, I'm hoping I can do something like that and break into the TV film world. It's a tough world to break into, but definitely trying my luck with that, and kind of just being patient, I guess. I'm in the city right now, um, currently currently living in a one bedroom by myself, but I'm actually moving out soon, into a place with two roommates from Michigan.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I'll be in the city for a while, I think. I love New York. There's something about it that's just so electrifying, and it makes me want to hustle. Like I see the pace of New York is very high, and like you just got to keep up. And so it makes me motivated. So
And
yeah, I guess that's the future right now.
I assume that New York is home base for the Universal Evan. You're going to be waiting
Yeah.
with that company. I assume that's how it's been. You've been with the company until you get a call.
Yes, it's the Broadway company is my home base, and then whenever I do get the call, I've had to go out to the tour once, but I didn't perform on the tour. Just it was like almost happened, but yeah, usually they give me like a couple days notice. I'll fly out, perform for a week or two, and then come back to the Broadway company. Toronto was a different story, but
You
yeah.
got to travel at least when you went to the
A
tour.
lot.
There you
Like,
go.
especially with these press events. These press events, like I was going to every single theater in the US. Like it was like really cool to get to see some of those touring houses, without being on a tour.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
last thing to lay on the table before the end of our episode, some advice you can give to young actors, and especially you mentioned going into film and going into breaking into the television world. Find the medium that is working right now, and that's what it is. And I hear a lot of people trying to get voiceover work, trying to get into the Law and Order side of people in New York, and TikTok. Exactly.
I mean,
like that's the new
find
thing.
the medium. You find the medium that is there, and you roll with it. Anyway, yeah.
But yeah, so just what's some advice you have? And honestly, I've seen some brilliant things on TikTok get started, and so it's funny that you mentioned that. But yeah, just lay down some advice for us.
Yeah, I mean, I always love to say this was actually my senior quote too at Burroughs. And this was told to me by a professor at the University of Michigan when I did this summer camp there. And this is honestly what sold me on the school, this quote alone. And he said, focus forward on your own journey, not sideways comparing yourself to others, because you can't move forward while you're constantly looking sideways. And to break that down really is really just focus on yourself. You have to be a team player, obviously, but in this field where you're always like, there's always going to be someone else that can belt higher than you, or kick their leg higher than you, or whatever, you know. Really, you have to just like buckle down, focus on yourself. Don't get too caught up in what everyone else is doing, what everyone else is booking, or anything like that. You'll sometimes see friends booking a Law and Order SVU episode, and you haven't gotten a Law and Order SVU audition, and that's okay. Like, that's their journey, you know. Your journey might be you don't book until you're 40 years old, and then at 40 you win a Tony, you know. Like you just never know, and you have to trust that process so much. Just continue working on yourself and just focus forward. That's the best advice I can give to people right now.
That's the end of the episode. Check us out on all of our platforms, and like always, we'll see you next week. This is Logan Soforenko signing off.